Decades before Drake built an empire, before Jay-Z became a billionaire, and long before Southern hip-hop went mainstream, one man from the New Orleans projects took the music industry by storm. From just $10,000 and few hit releases, he built a music business that put the hip-hop industry in the palm of his hand. But in a few years, he lost everything and filed for bankruptcy. To many, he was known as Master P, and this is the tragic rise and fall the industry tried to forget. Bankruptcy, violent streets, and humble beginnings. Master P took a small inheritance from his grandfather's death and turned it into a $400 million music empire in under a decade. At his peak, his label was releasing more platinum albums in a single year than most labels release in 5. He owned his masters when people barely owned one, signed Snoop Dogg when the rapper needed a new home most, and put New Orleans on the map long before the music scene had seen the region with unique respect. And then it was all gone. By 2003, the man who had once reported over $110 million in revenue in a single year was now listing his monthly income in a federal bankruptcy filing at under $2,000. The IRS was after him. His brother was facing legal charges that could send him to a lifetime in prison. His artists had walked away, and his label was finished. As we'll see, how all this played out was complicated. Percy Miller was born in 1970 in New Orleans, Louisiana, in a neighborhood called the Calliope Projects. This wasn't the kind of rough neighborhood that gets romanticized in interviews and movies. According to Miller, it was the kind where funerals happen for people who haven't finished high school, the place where those who make it out alive are the exception. Percy knew this as well, and he wanted out. However, his plan to pull this off wasn't music, but rather his plan was basketball, and he was good enough at it. Genuinely good enough to earn a scholarship to the University of Houston. That scholarship was his ticket off the streets, his only exit out of a neighborhood that had taken everyone he grew up with. But all it took was one knee injury at a game during his freshman year to ruin everything. And just like that, the door closed indefinitely. Still wanting to put those streets behind him, Percy went on to make the single decision that would change the entire trajectory of his life forever. Taking the risk entirely on himself, Percy Miller transferred to Merritt College in Oakland, California, shifting his focus to business. Shortly after that, he lost his grandfather in a workplace accident. He got a $10,000 settlement from this loss. And while most 20-year-olds in that situation pay bills, buy a car, and maybe settle some debts, Percy used the money to open a record store in Richmond, California. He gave it the name he had in mind for a while: No Limit Records. It was small by all metrics, nothing close to anything appropriate by industry standards. But Percy's mind was never on what the store was. It was on what the store could become. So before he could get his hands on an artist he could work with, Percy started selling music out of it. And of course, that included his own. His debut album, Getaway Clean, dropped in 1991. It didn't chart or blow up by any stretch, but it accomplished what it was set out for, bringing people into the store. Slowly but surely, aspiring artists and potential investors came in to check him out. They laughed at his music sometimes, but Percy took the attention over the silence every time. And he wanted more. To do that, though, Percy realized he'd have to go back to where he came from. He'd return to the same violent streets he desperately tried to escape not long ago. Yet what he found there would change everything. Building the label. It was in 1995 when Percy Miller moved the whole operation back home to New Orleans. He wanted artists who were willing to grind the way he was back then, people who needed to leave that neighborhood as he did. And what he found was a strong roster that would reshape Southern hip-hop entirely. It was during this expedition that he found future heavy hitters like Mystical, Mia X, Soulja Slim, his brother Corey, who rapped as C Murder, and Vishon, also known as Silk the Shocker. They all came aboard. And now, No Limit wasn't just a label anymore, but was slowly expanding into a family business in the most literal sense. The model Percy built was unlike anything the industry had seen from an independent. The production process was fast and efficient, record fast, release constantly, keep all costs low and the volume high. All albums were intentionally designed to look identical. The branding was specific and intentional, from the tank logo to the loud gold covers designed by Pen and Pixel. Every release looked like it belonged on a blockbuster movie poster. And for this reason, anyone back then could easily recognize a No Limit album from across a room. And that was the point. But great looks were only the beginning. Sometime in early 1996, Percy sat down with Priority Records, one of the biggest distributors in the game, and negotiated something almost no independent label owner had ever pulled off. After a long and difficult conversation, Priority would press and ship the records from Percy's artists, but No Limit would keep 85% of every dollar. Yet that wasn't all they demanded. Most importantly, and this is the part that the entire industry underestimated, No Limit would also own every master recording. Every song, album, and dollar those recordings ever generated would now belong to him. In an era when major labels were still convincing artists to sign away everything they'd ever create in exchange for an advance and a prayer, Percy Miller kept what belonged to him. The deal was done. And once the music started moving, there were truly no limits in sight. It was hit after hit for Percy's label. Ice Cream Man went platinum in 1996. Ghetto D hit #1 in 1997. By 1998, No Limit released 23 albums in a single year. 10 of those albums went platinum. At least 11 went gold. Percy's own album that year moved 500,000 copies in its first week and eventually sold 4.5 million in total. This was the best-selling project of his career, and yet, he was not done. After 23 albums and 11 platinum albums in a single year, the world would be shocked to learn that music was only a small fraction of Percy's overall success. Behind the scenes, Percy had quietly built an entire business infrastructure around the No Limit name. A clothing line, a film company, a travel agency, a sports management company, and a real estate portfolio with over 100 properties across the country. He signed Ricky Williams, the Heisman Trophy-winning running back. He did this straight out of college, years before the industry started applauding rappers moving into sports representation. Jay-Z would get celebrated for doing similar things years later as an innovator. But here Percy was doing those same things first, with money built from scratch out of one of the poorest cities in America. By the end of 1998, Black Enterprise reported that No Limit Enterprises had generated over $110 million in revenue in a single year. But things were just getting started. Snoop Dogg knew Percy's record label and wanted in. After leaving Death Row Records, Snoop needed a new home for his music, so he chose No Limit and made his choice public. This move, announced in the open, told the entire industry that Percy's operation was legitimate, stable, and worth paying attention to. And under the tank, Snoop dropped 3 albums. Each one sold over 1 million copies, proving his choice might have been tight after all. From the outside, Percy Miller's net worth was now approaching $500 million. He had taken $10,000 and built a machine that the entire music industry couldn't look away from. He owned his masters, fully ran his business, and nobody called his shots but him. And that was exactly when it started to fall apart. When it all went wrong. Most business empires don't fall from the outside, and the first cracks in No Limit had nothing to do with rival labels or bad press. Ironically, they came from the same strategy that had made Percy Miller the most powerful independent in rap history. Yes, 23 albums a year make millions, but that only works until the albums start sounding stale and boring. And by 1999, that became the slogan of his biggest critics. Beats by the pound. The production collective that gave No Limit its signature sound was slowly burning out. Many artists, including Snoop Dogg, were being rushed into studios before they were ready. Songs were going out unfinished, and fans were getting irritated. The fast pace that had once felt relentless and exciting was now producing music that sounded like rushed content, similar to what younger people today would call slop. Still, No Limits kept making lots of cash, but everything changed when Cash Money, a rival record label, made their move. They had been studying everything Percy built from scratch, and in 1998, Cash Money signed a distribution deal with Universal Records worth $30 million over 3 years. But more than the money, Cash Money had something No Limit was quickly starting to lose. And that was a sound that felt alive. Manny Fresh was producing music that sounded like New Orleans in a way that felt intentional and respectful to the culture. Unlike No Limits, no rush or trend was copied with this label. All they showed was authenticity and creativity at its best. Juvenile dropped 400 degrees, and it hit differently from everything No Limit had put out that year. The hot boys were everywhere. A 16-year-old named Lil Wayne was already making waves in hip-hop and was getting impossible to ignore. No Limit had built its empire on volume. Now Cash Money was building theirs on public desire. The audience felt the difference and started moving toward the new sound. And it didn't take long for the roster to start moving as well. After several months of being forced to make music without time to breathe, Snoop Dogg's 3-year contract expired, and he refused to renew it. Then Mystical left as well. C Murder moved on, and Beats, by the pound, walked out the door. Every one of them gave the same answer when asked why they were leaving at almost the same time. Their answers were all the same: creative freedom. And every one of them meant it. One by one, the people who had made No Limit the big success it was were now leaving. What was left was the machine. But the machine had nothing to run on. But things were only about to get worse. By late 2001, the Priority Records deal had expired. That deal had been the engine that kept money pouring in even when the industry had started to move on from his music. The expired deal took along the 85% split and the master ownership. And from this point, No Limit would no longer operate like a major while staying independent. To keep his music business afloat, Percy signed a new distribution deal with Universal Records. The advance was $10 million. And while this might sound significant on paper, it starts to feel like nothing when you remember that No Limit had been generating over 10 times that amount each year in the late 90s. This deal made it clear that Percy Miller wasn't negotiating from strength anymore. He was taking the best deal the industry was still willing to offer to someone whose moment had clearly passed. But to mark what he hoped would be a better era for his business, he renamed it the new No Limit. The fast releases kept coming, but nothing charted, and no song connected with audiences. Or at least not in the way it once did. The magic was gone, and everyone in the industry already knew it. Though for Percy Miller, that would only be the start of many troubles he'd deal with. The tragedy that destroyed everything. On January 12, 2002, a 16-year-old fan named Steve Thomas was shot and put down inside a nightclub in Harvey, Louisiana. And Percy's brother Corey, also known as C Murder, was identified as the shooter and arrested not long after. The arrest didn't just send a shockwave through what remained of No Limit's reputation. It sent one through Percy's entire world. Corey wasn't just a label artist or a member of Percy's family. His 1998 album Life or Death had gone platinum and peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200. He had been one of the label's most important voices, and now he was at the center of a murder case that would drag through the courts for years. Many things would go down in court during this time. 2 trials, a few witness recantations and appeals that went all the way to the Louisiana Supreme Court. In 2009, Corey Miller was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to mandatory life in prison. But Percy never stopped fighting publicly for his brother's release. Not once, not twice, not for a decade, not ever. But the conviction held. And as recently as February 2026, the Louisiana Supreme Court denied Corey's appeal for the 3rd time. He remains at the Louisiana State Penitentiary to this day, and the label never recovered from the weight of it all. So much back then that on December 17, 2003, No Limit Records filed for bankruptcy. The man who had reported $110 million in revenue in a single year was now listing his monthly income in court documents at less than $2,000. He owed the IRS $1.5 million in back taxes. His film company wasn't faring well either. The film crew he had hired for his movie Uncle P sued him because he couldn't produce $240,000 to pay the people who had worked for him. The same man who signed Snoop Dogg and Ricky Williams in the same year could no longer pay a budget film crew anymore. That's how fast it went. And this was the part that made it sting worse than anything else. This collapse hadn't been forced on him by a competitor or a corrupt industry. Rather, it was the same strategy that built the empire. Many believe Percy had never foreseen the limits of his company's business model and therefore failed to plan for the moment he'd hit it. The volume model, the fast releases, and the factory pace only worked as long as the quality held and the team stayed together. The moment both cracked at the same time, there was nothing underneath to catch the fall. Percy Miller had built something no one else from where he came from had ever built. And then, he watched it slowly erode in under 5 years. This was how the slow erosion occurred. The slow and tragic downfall. One of the biggest cracks in his successful persona came to light in 2006 when he appeared on Dancing with the Stars. He stepped in after his son Romeo Miller dropped out due to injury. He was partnered with professional dancer Ashley Del Grosso. Together, they earned a combined score of 8 out of 30. This was the lowest score in the show's history at that point, and he was eliminated in week 4. The basketball dream kept pulling at him too. Between 1999 and 2004, Percy had played in the Continental Basketball Association, earned preseason tryouts with the Charlotte Hornets and Toronto Raptors, and participated in the 2008 McDonald's NBA All-Star Celebrity Game, where he scored 17 points. None of it led anywhere professionally, but it revealed something true about him that the music industry had always obscured. Percy Miller genuinely loved basketball more than rap. Despite his immense success, music was nothing more than a means to an end, and the basketball court was always the destination. But as you might expect, neither industry cared that much, especially with the music scene evolving in directions that made the no-limit model look more outdated with every passing year. Streaming was the final nail in the coffin for No Limit. When it arrived, it single-handedly rewrote every rule the label had been built on. 23 albums flooding physical shelves was a strategy, but on leading platforms like Spotify, the shelf is infinite, and the only thing that cuts through is a song good and unique enough for any stranger on the internet to post and share across different communities and other platforms as well. After that, other artists and label owners like Drake, Kendrick Lamar, and J. Cole built their dominance on the opposite of everything No Limit had stood for. They put out fewer releases with much longer gaps, making every project treated like an event rather than another quick cash grab. The artists who won the streaming era were the ones who made scarcity feel like a gift. Percy had built an empire on abundance, and the market had moved on from that idea entirely. Scarcity was the new currency, and for some reason, No Limit hadn't figured that out yet, even by late 2019. Instead, what he seemed to be more focused on at the time was pushing his son Romeo's music career. And he was planning to accomplish it the old-fashioned way. But though Percy Miller was the executive producer of all his projects, none of them translated into the commercial success that would have proven No Limit still meant something. But in the midst of these failures, something very interesting happened. Many of his other business ventures multiplied and scattered. These ventures produced different things like food products, nutritional shakes, CBD lines, cereals, and syrups marketed with a community-first message. Each one carried the same sincerity that has always defined Percy Miller as a person. But the brand was now trying to stand for too many things at once, which is another way of saying it wasn't standing for any single thing at all. In 2020, BET aired No Limit Chronicles, a 5-part documentary series covering the label's rise. Fans and critics responded with genuine warmth. For a moment, the conversation shifted back to legacy, focusing more on what Percy had actually built and what it had meant to a generation of people who grew up on music from back in the day. But yet again, another big controversy was on the horizon. The internet went into a frenzy when the popular reality TV star Kim Kardashian suddenly entered the conversation in 2023. She shocked everyone by publicly calling Corey Miller's conviction unjust. And despite the buzz and backlash that rose from her declarations, the courts didn't move. And many legal professionals commented that her intervention only further complicated the case's public perception, rather than helping Corey. Yet the appeals continued, and the final denial came in February 2026. Today, Corey Miller is still in prison, and his brother Percy has never stopped fighting for him. The bittersweet ending. In July 2025, Percy Miller announced his retirement from music. His final performance was at the Essence Festival in New Orleans on July 6th, the same city where everything had started. The Louisiana legislature had named June 11th Master P Day in his honor. He had been inducted into the NOLA Walk of Fame. Several thousand people showed up to send him off. He told an interviewer in 2026, that it was a bittersweet feeling he'd never forget. And then he walked off the stage and into a gymnasium. Earlier that year, Percy had been named head coach and president of basketball operations for the University of New Orleans men's basketball team. The dream he had carried since the Calliope projects, the one the knee injury took from him on a college court in Houston, had come back around in a form he never expected. He had spent 2 decades running a youth coaching program called Miller Ballers, working with young players the way he wished someone had worked with him. He did it long enough and seriously enough that DeMar DeRozan, who was one of the most respected players in the NBA, publicly called Percy Miller a father figure who taught him not just basketball, but how to properly understand the business. At his introductory press conference for the University of New Orleans position, Percy said something quietly that landed harder than any of the music ever had. He admitted that being a coach there and being able to save these kids' lives, take them off the street, and help them get their college degree at a Division I school felt so important to him. Percy Miller's net worth today is reported to be around $200 million. This is less than half of what the empire generated at its peak. The family business that produced over $110 million in a single year is gone permanently. Today, he is still fighting for his brother, working in the gym and building an all-new and different kind of business. That is the triumph the filing never captured, a bittersweet ending to an era that defined hip-hop. Let's discuss in the comments below. Do you think No Limit was ahead of its time? Or did Percy's own strategy cost him everything? We'd love to hear your thoughts down there. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Global Status for more videos like this. Now click the next video on your screen and others on the channel. You will enjoy it. Until next time, take care.